Hello everyone, and welcome to another WRC 9 video. Now, this one's going to differ a little from the last one in that I want to actually talk about the physics improvements in this game, specifically on gravel, because, see, that's where, to me, the last one really fell down and needed more attention. See, there have also been quite a lot of questions about how it's moved forward and how it compares to WRC and Rally 2, so I'm going to try and give you some insight on where I feel it's really moved forward. Obviously, I've played for a few hours now, where my body has let me. So yeah, let's get into it. Before I get on to WRC 9, I'm actually going to give a little bit of context on where the series has come from with WRC 8 and just how big a leap that was also from WRC 7. WRC 7 for me was a pure controller game, and 8 I bought purely with the thought of playing it on a controller, but then I don't know, I felt like giving it a go on a wheel, see if it actually improved, and I still remember being really surprised at how far that had moved forwards. But given a little more time, obviously with my background in racing sims and all that, could start to see areas where it fell down. Now I've tried a few times to try and describe the car behaviour in that game, and the best way I've come up with so far is that it felt like a singular mushy lump. It didn't really feel like it was interacting particularly well with the surface itself, the suspension, the tyres, the car. It all just felt like this one lump. The centre of gravity felt like it was up in the roof to me, which, not ideal. Like I say, the suspension, it just felt like it was this singular lump that was wallowing down the stage. To me, it always felt like you were fighting the dynamics of the car rather than actually driving the car. It felt like the only way to really manipulate the car to do things you sort of wanted it to do was to make extreme changes in the setup, which not exactly ideal, because then you're dealing with a whole nother mess in other areas. Now, WRC 9 is, in that respect, such an unbelievable leap forwards. Now, I'd heard people saying it was a really big leap before playing it in previews and such, but to actually understand that, I had to play it for a few hours and really get into it, and it's a massive jump from 8. It doesn't feel like you're driving this singular lump that I've described anymore. It feels like it's really functioning much more like a car now. The suspension is certainly feels like it's interacting with the surface much more now. It actually feels like the suspension is working on all 4 corners, which is a huge change. The weight, the car has weight now. You really have to deal with the weight shifting around, and it's just, all that has created an infinitely more natural driving experience for me. Now, and whilst I suppose in theory, weight shifting around might make the car more difficult, but because that weight gives it a more natural feel, it feels that you can actually apply driving techniques that you've learned into manipulating the car. My favourite thing so far is being able to manipulate the front just with the brakes, going into faster or medium speed corners if I feel like I'm just a little bit wide or off the line that I want. I could just touch the brakes a little bit of steering input, and you get the nose in, just get it tucked in. Like that feeling is amazing. You can also now initiate controllable slides just with a combination of steering input, brake, and throttle. It's so nice to feel that just endless understeer feeling from 8 completely gone now. The car over bumps and jumps as well is much more natural and predictable Again, you can manipulate the car so well with the brakes now that bumps, and especially bumps, are much more manageable. It's something that you can learn to do rather than just sort of hanging on for dear life, which was certainly the case in the previous game. Thanks to all those improvements now, you can actually use the setup of the car to tailor it to the way that you want to drive the car, rather than trying to manipulate it in a way to make it do something because the physics model isn't allowing you to drive it in a certain way. That is, again, such a massive step forwards over WRC 8. Now, despite those, despite all those resounding improvements from 8, there's still a couple of little areas for me where it's falling down. It's not, there's nothing game breaking, but just little things that, bug me a little bit. One of those is how forgiving it is in some extreme circumstances. There have been a few times where I've been at such an angle, such a big angle, so sideways, completely out of control, but just using the handbrake and full throttling it has pulled it round from nearly any situation. Where, if I'm being honest, I should have had a massive crash and rolled and broken it and had a very expensive bill to pay in the career mode. Now, it's not to say it being forgiving is necessarily a bad thing in those circumstances. At the end of the day, it's a game. It's got to be playable to the masses and such. But it's just one of those little things that bugs me every now and then. One of the negative I pick up on a little bit is the car. It's pretty rare now, but sometimes it feels like loses all of its weight for whatever reason in some low-speed situations. It feels like you're almost floating a little bit. That was a big problem with WRC 8. That was pretty much any time you were at low speed, you could do anything with the car. It was really very strange, but it's still much improved in 9. It's just a little bit weird when it does happen. Now, the last area I'd really pick out as something that's not great is the force feedback. To me, it's still lacking much detail, really. I don't feel like I'm getting much information about what the car is doing through the wheel. I very much feel like I'm driving it by eye rather than what the wheel is telling me. Which isn't so bad, because the car now behaves in such a way that it's much more predictable and very much more natural to drive. But still, it would be nice just to have a little bit more detail in the wheel. Despite that, though, WRC 9's gravel experience is a massive leap forward from WRC 8, and it's something that, when my body lets me, I'm struggling to tear myself away from it. It's just so much fun. It's an amazing leap, really, despite some of those little concerns, but I'm just having so much fun with it, and that's all I can ask for, really. Anyway, I think that just about covers it. I hope you've all enjoyed listening to me ramble on for the last little while, and I'll see you all next time.